Good evening and welcome to tonight's telephone town hall with Congressman Kildee. My name is Mitchell, and I will be the moderator for tonight's event. We will begin in just a moment, but before we begin, a few quick points to make. Right now, we're in the process of dialing out to thousands of Flint residents, so just stay on the line and you'll be hearing from Congressman Kildee and our water and health experts shortly. We are also joined tonight by Dr. Hanna-Attisha of Hurley Children's Hospital and Dr. Marc Edwards from Virginia Tech. We also have members of the media on the phone in listen-only mode. Also, we want to hear from you in tonight's event. If you would like to ask a question of Congressman Kildee or any of our experts at any time, please press 0 on your telephone keypad and you will be connected directly with one of our volunteer operators. Again, press 0 to ask a question. Thank you so much for being with us. We're going to pause momentarily and be back in a moment. If you have just joined us, good evening and welcome to tonight's telephone town hall with Congressman Kildee. I'm Mitchell and I'll be the moderator for tonight's event. We are about to begin in just a moment, and thank you again for joining us. Right now, we're in the process of dialing out to thousands of Flint residents, so please stay on the line, and we'll hear from Congressman Kildee and our water and health experts shortly. Tonight, we are also joined by Dr. Hanna-Attisha of Hurley Children's Hospital and Dr. Marc Edwards from Virginia Tech. If at any point during the telephone town hall you would like to ask a question, please press 0 at any time during this event. Again, please press 0 at any time to ask a question. And now, without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Congressman Kildee. Congressman?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for all of you for joining tonight's call. The issue of water quality in Flint is the number one concern in our community that we hear about every day, and it's the number one priority of my office at this time. I want to start off, first of all, by thanking the countless people, champions really, that continue to speak up about water quality in Flint. As you all know, for months, many officials from the governor and the Department of Environmental Quality denied that there was even a problem and ensured city residents that the water was fine. Many of those people who spoke up and never backed down are on this call tonight, including Dr. Mona and Dr. Marc Edwards, who both played critical roles in getting the state of Michigan to finally admit that there actually was a problem. Both are on the call, and we'll have time in a few minutes to give comments and answer questions. Let me just say, and we all know, the Flint water crisis resulted from a failure of government. Residents are rightfully angry. I'm angry over the lack of immediate action to address these unsafe lead levels in the city's water. The state of Michigan has the responsibility, and it failed to ensure water quality in Flint. For weeks, if not months, despite independent research from people like Dr. Mona and Dr. Edwards, the state denied that there was even a problem. Now they have admitted that federal drinking water laws were not followed. And the Environmental Protection Agency bears some responsibility as well, since they are the ultimate responsible party for ensuring that drinking water standards are adhered to. So residents of our city deserve to know why, for months, the state of Michigan failed to follow federal safe drinking water laws. I will continue to push for full transparency and answers to these questions and more. That's why I have called for a thorough federal investigation into the water problems in Flint. A complete review of actions at every level will result in answers and transparency, and hopefully it will begin to restore public confidence for Flint's residents. It will also ensure that we take steps to make sure this never happens again. Again, at the federal level, I also continue to look for resources to help alleviate this public health crisis. While immediate attention has resulted in short-term help like lead-clearing filters, bottled water, and ultimately reconnecting back to the Detroit water system, we must also now think about the long-term investments that need to be made to ensure safe drinking water. This includes replacement of lead service lines, both in the city's infrastructure distribution system and also private lines. The Flint River caused extensive damage to Flint's already aged water infrastructure system, and major investments are needed to make repairs and ensure water quality going forward. So I'll continue to advocate for the state of Michigan and EPA to forgive Flint's federal loans through the Safe Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund. I mean, this is one avenue that could allow for potential federal resources, and I'll continue to work with the EPA and other federal agencies on this and on additional efforts. Also, interestingly today, I met with Tom Frieden, who is the director of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. I also spoke with Susan Hedman from the EPA, both about getting additional federal resources for our city of Flint. The state government, including the governor and the state legislature, also have responsibility. Let's remember that the decision that led to this water crisis was not Flint's. It was while the city was under the control of a state-appointed emergency manager. And despite what you might hear and what you might say, the decisions were made under state control, and those decisions contributed to this problem. And finally, let's just say it. Access to safe drinking water is a fundamental human right. Having a water system that delivers clean drinking water to our homes, our schools, our children needs to be a priority at every level of government. So thanks for joining the call. I look forward to hearing from you in this town hall and answering any questions. With that, I'll turn it back to Mitchell.
Thank you so much, Congressman Kildee, for your remarks. And now we'd actually like to open it up for our first poll question of the evening and answers from those on the call. Using your telephone keypad, please answer the following poll question. How has the Flint water crisis impacted you in your home? Press 1 for not at all, press 2 for moderately, or press 3 for severe. Again, press 1 for not at all, 2 for moderately, or 3 for severe. We'll pause for just a moment to collect answers. Thank you for your answers to our first poll question. And now I would like to introduce our second speaker of the evening, Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha. Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, known in our community simply as Dr. Mona, is the director of Hurley Medical Center's Pediatric Residency Program. After months of assurances from state officials that Flint's water was safe, it was her research, along with Dr. Edwards, who we will hear from a bit later, that showed a dangerous spike in children's blood lead levels. Dr. Mona, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch, and thank you, Congressman Kildee, to you and to your entire staff for your hard work and for being champions on this cause from the very beginning. I'd also like to give a shout-out to all the activists, the moms, everybody who's been fighting this since day one, right since April 2014 when they knew there was something wrong. So a huge thank you to them and a huge thank you to Dr. Edwards and his Virginia Tech team. So I think most people know about our research. Our research looked at blood lead levels, and we noticed a huge increase in the percentage of children with elevated blood lead levels compared to before the switch, which was in 2013 data, to after the switch in 2015. And that's now been confirmed by the state. So this was very concerning and thankfully kind of motivated a lot of the subsequent action. But I want to share a little bit about lead. There's now calls for more lead testing, and I want people to know that the lead in your blood only lasts for a little bit. So the half-life of lead in your blood, half of it will go away within 20 to 30 days. So if you get your blood tested now, it's not necessarily going to tell you that you never were exposed. You could have been exposed a year ago or 9 months ago or 6 months ago or 3 months ago, and that lead level could be normal. So us in the medical community and the public health community are assuming that all of Flint who drank this water, who cooked with this water, was exposed. So what are we going to do now? As physicians, as pediatricians who are in charge of our children's health, and not only now but their future health, we want people to be educated about what they can do now. So please know that despite the switch back to Lake Huron Detroit water, the water is not safe yet. Many of us have lead service lines, so we need to continue taking precautions. Get a filter. Call 211. United Way is awesome. They'll get you a filter. Keep flushing the water. Don't use that water for babies and pregnant moms, because those are the most developmentally vulnerable population, and they're the ones that really should have zero lead exposure. We also want to share that the effects of lead poisoning are not now. So when a child or anybody has lead poisoning, we don't see the impact right now. It is a long-term problem. So lead poisoning can impact a child's development and behavior in the long term. So we'll see those problems maybe in 5 years when they have problems in school, or in 10 years when they might have behavioral problems, or in 15 years when they might have problems with the criminal justice system. So you need to follow up with your doctor. If you have a child, you need to get connected with your doctor so they can do that continuous developmental assessments at every visit. If you have a concern about wanting your child to get blood tested, go talk to your doctor. They can follow up with you on those labs and give you additional medical care. The earlier that we identify a problem with a child's development, the earlier we can throw resources at children, like early intervention early on, and the better outcome that child will have. Our goal is not to see any of those long-term impacts. If we can do all these buffering, secondary preventative measures, maybe we won't see any of those impacts, and that would be tremendous. Another thing that families can do right now is great nutrition. So nutrition is the single most important thing that can help with lead-exposed children. Foods that contain iron, vitamin C, and calcium, specifically iron, vitamin C, and calcium, help get rid of lead in your body. So give your kids those things. So iron-fortified cereals, meats, oranges, milk, yogurt, all those things have iron, calcium, and vitamin C. If you're not enrolled in WIC and you're eligible, get signed up. Sign up for SNAP, which is food assistance. We also have a great program in Michigan called SNAP Double Bucks, where your money goes extra to purchase healthy foods. However, if you're concerned that your child's not getting great nutrition, definitely talk to your doctor about a multivitamin with iron. That can help as well. And then if you have the option to breastfeed your child, breastfeed. Breastfeeding is highly protective and encouraged for lead exposures. So we want to make sure our kids grow up healthy and strong and don't see these effects of lead poisoning. So stimulate your kids, nurture them, read to them, play with them, love them, spend time with them, enroll them in early Head Start, get into home visiting programs. It's all of these wraparound services that will help buffer and protect your child so that they can achieve their life course potential. So please know that not every kid will have these long-term problems. We want our kids to be strong and resilient, so we need to work with your provider, work with your public health community to get all these additional resources for your kids.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mona. And now we'll take our first live question from those on the call. Frida Coleman from Flint, your line is live. And the question is, go ahead.
Yes, I was wondering, are there any long-term effects of too much iron in older children and elderly and adults, and what can be done for them?
Thank you, Frida, for your question. Dr. Mona, would you like to answer?
So I think the question was, are there any long-term effects of iron in adults and in children? So anything in excess could be a problem, but if you were asking about long-term effects of lead, yes, absolutely, many long-term impacts of lead in terms of your IQ and your cognition and your behavior. But these are questions that you specifically need to talk to your provider with because everybody has different medical conditions, and I can't recommend multivitamins for everybody because you might have, say, a kidney problem, and that's not going to work for you. So these are great conversations to have with your medical provider who can access your entire medical history.
And on the iron issue, if you are concerned about iron because many Flint residents were exposed to very high iron in their drinking water in general, iron's considered a nutrient, and there are very few adverse consequences from having too much exposure to iron. So that would not be something I would worry about, with the exception that sometimes high iron in Flint was also associated with high lead.
Thank you both, Dr. Mona and Dr. Edwards. We'll take a second question now from the audience. Lee, also from Flint. Lee, your line is live. Lee, are you there? We seem to have lost Lee. So we will actually go to now our second live audience poll question for tonight's telephone town hall. Again, we want to hear from you. Do you support Congressman Dan Kildee's request for a federal investigation into the water problems in Flint? Press 1 if you agree, press 2 if you disagree, and press 3 if you're unfamiliar and you would like more information. Again, press 1 if you agree, press 2 if you disagree, and press 3 if you are unfamiliar and would like more information. We'll pause for just a moment to collect answers. Thank you. Thank you for your responses. We'll now take another live audience question, this time from Carrie, who lives in Flint. Carrie?
Hi, Carl. I do appreciate it. My question is basically about the people who did the testing and reassured the public, the population of the city, that the water was safe to drink. I would like to see charges brought up against those people, because what they did was criminal. To okay something and say that it was safe to drink, and it affects so many people. So where are we on charges brought against the people who did the testing?
Thank you, Carrie, very much for your question. We've had a lot of questions tonight about accountability and transparency. Congressman Kildee, would you like to answer?
Yes, and Carrie, thank you for the question. It's a very important one. Let me start off by saying this. The issue of accountability is really the most important question that we turn to once we have resolved the immediate crisis. So we have begun looking at this as long, and so have others, including Senator Jim Hanna-Attisha. I've asked the federal government to start with a full review of the decisions that were made at the federal level, as well as their oversight at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency of the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality's role in this. But as far as I'm concerned, the people who made the decisions were at fault. But if anybody is determined to have knowingly kept information that would have protected public health, then they would have to face whatever consequences this legal system will mete out to them. And that is a decision that won't be made by myself, but will be made by people who have that direct responsibility. But the main point that I'm focusing on when it comes to this issue of accountability is that when it comes to accountability, that's more than just reassigning people to different jobs, perhaps if they failed to do a good job. And it's more than just an acknowledgement that mistakes were made. And frankly, it's more than just an apology. What I want for the people of Flint is for the state government, because, of course, the emergency manager was an agent of the state government, to acknowledge its responsibility and provide direct support to deal with the health effects and the infrastructure costs that this terrible mistake will have on the people in the community of Flint. So it means basically helping to pay the cost of the mistake that they made. Of course, there's one way that could happen right away, and it's a very easy decision. It would be for the EPA and the state of Michigan to answer my request that they use the Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund to help people replace their private lead service lines. That is something that I have called for, and that is something that they can do that is tangible. But I think your point about further accountability is one that is quite valid and should be pursued, and I will do what I can to make sure that it is.
Thank you, Congressman, for your answer and for the question. We'll now have an opportunity to hear from Dr. Marc Edwards from Virginia Tech. Dr. Marc Edwards is a civil engineering and environmental engineer at Virginia Tech. A lead and corrosion expert, his independent research showed elevated lead levels in Flint's water supply. We are fortunate to have Dr. Edwards with us from Virginia this evening. Dr. Edwards?
Well, thanks for organizing this event and including me. And let me just start by saying how sorry I am for the ordeal that Flint residents have gone through over the last 18 months. And with our existing laws, none of this should have happened. But it did, and at the same time, I'm just so proud of how this kind of unlikely coalition came together of Flint residents and rogue EPA employees and Congressman Kildee and others, and able to get this problem recognized and solved in spite of and not because of the agencies whose job it is to protect us. And I'm also so appreciative of Dr. Mona and for her team's work in bringing out the health effects, which complemented the work done by Flint residents and the VT Flint Water Study team. And I also just wanted to say on an optimistic note that because everyone did step up, we avoided another year or so of completely unnecessary exposure to lead and water. And that's something to be very, very thankful for today. And also, you know, over the years I've worked with many parents, many families who had children who've been lead poisoned by exposure to water. And while it's true that you never really know what might have been had that exposure not occurred, in many, many cases, those children went on to have extraordinary careers and lives. And I just talked to one parent last fall, in fact, who had a child who was lead poisoned to so extraordinarily high levels from lead in water that the child had to be hospitalized for 3 days. So these are levels that probably 7 times higher than almost the worst case that we've seen in Flint. And that child grew up and just recently obtained her PhD in engineering from Berkeley. So by following Dr. Mona's advice, all of which I endorse, and, you know, really a lot of your love, Flint's kids can have a bright future, and that's why I applaud Congressman Kildee for having this call here and getting some of this advice out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Edwards. And now we'll take some additional questions from people on the line. Doris from Flint, your line is open.
I was wondering, I have house filters in my home, but I also am buying water from the store. I'm 84 years old, and what condition from the water that's coming through the filter in the house is compared to the water I buy in the store, at my age, of course.
Thank you, Doris, for your question.
Yeah,
Dr. Edwards?
Yeah, the water that you're buying from the store, I'm sure is very high quality. It has low levels of bacteria, low levels of lead, and so you're safe as long as you drink that. And if you have a filter at your home, one of the lead-certified filters that are now being distributed, you are protected from lead in the water. So you could use that water as well. It's really a decision that's up to you. So both sources are suitable for someone your age or any age for that matter, but no one should be drinking unfiltered Flint water until some months down the road when we know that the water's clean and safe again.
Thank you, Doris and Dr. Edwards. We'll now take another question from Delphine, also from Flint. Your line is open.
Hello. I have a question. I heard many times in the last couple of months that people were afraid to bathe in the water that they got in the city of Flint. And I just wondered, was there any danger of someone having some sort of a ill effect from just bathing in the water directly from the tap? Because most people don't have a filter in their bathrooms, you know, for a shower. So I wondered, because I thought I didn't notice any effect. I do drink bottled water, but as far as the exposure from just bathing or showering, was there any danger to an adult?
Thank you for the question. Dr. Mona, would you like to respond?
Sure. So lead is not going to get in your body from contact from bathing or washing, but people had concerns about rashes and all these other kind of vague medical concerns when the water switched, and that could have been because of the high bacterial load in the water. And because of that high bacterial load, they had to put a lot more chlorine in the water. So that could have caused some of these skin conditions. But the lead is fine. I mean, that's not a concern with bathing. And I'm sure Dr. Edwards could add to that as well.
Dr. Edwards?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. So there are people who are more susceptible to the bacteria infections that can occur sometimes from potable water systems, although they are rare. And also we know that the levels of bacteria in the water and the types of the bacteria vary in a water system. So if you're near the water treatment plant, in general you have kind of lower levels of bacteria, and other systems, if your house is served by a long iron pipe, for example, can have much higher levels of harmful bacteria. So there's individual susceptibility, and the likelihood of rashes is also expected to vary throughout the system. But in general, that harm isn't believed at this time to be permanent. And I have little doubt that some people were getting rashes from the water, from the bacteria that are present in it. But currently we don't have laws that protect people from this. And in fact, our scientific understanding of it is incomplete.
Thank you for the question, Delphine, and Dr. Mona and Dr. Edwards for your answers. We'll now take a moment to read the response percentages for our poll questions this evening. From our first poll question, the question being, how has the Flint water crisis impacted you and your home? 3 for severe, 2 for moderate, and 1 not at all. 57% of those on the phone tonight said the Flint water crisis had severely affected their home. 28% had said moderately, and 15% said not at all. Thank you again for participating in this, and we'll move on to our next question from Andrea from Flint. Andrea, your line is open.
Hi, I just have a question maybe for the Congressman, and I thank both of the doctors for spending the time that they're spending, and I'm sure and I'm hopeful that there'll be more forums like this or in some form to help parents and others through the medical questions and such. But how can we as a community, Congressman, help you accomplish what you need to accomplish so we can have clean, healthy, safe water and a quality of life?
Well, first of all, let me thank you, Andrea, for your efforts on this subject. And the first thing I will say is the way to help all of us, and if it's helping me in terms of what I'm trying to accomplish with Flint, is to do what you all did, and that was speak up. It really makes a difference. We live in a democracy that is a participatory democracy. It doesn't just work better when citizens are engaged. It only works, as this whole situation has proven. It only works when citizens play their necessary role in government, and that is to speak truth to power. And you did that, and you won. Now, it's a big loss that we've experienced, but what you have reaffirmed is that people's voices matter. So I think now, as we turn to what the next steps are, one thing that would be helpful is for people to speak up about Flint getting forgiveness from the Clean Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund debt that it has back to the state of Michigan, $22 million. A big down payment that the state could make on compensating the city of Flint water system for the damage that it did to it would be to forgive those loans. And if people speak loudly with one voice on that question, I think it will create much more momentum. And as time goes by, I'll have more direct ways for people to become engaged. But to me, that's the first one that comes to mind. And thank you again for your question and for your advocacy.
Thank you, Congressman Kildee and Andrea, for the question. We'll take another question, this time from Sabrina, also from Flint. Sabrina, your line is open.
Hi, how are you? I'd just like to know, if you have children who have behavioral problems already, how would this lead affect them?
Thank you, Sabrina, for your question. Dr. Mona, would you like to respond first?
Sure. It's impossible to pinpoint exactly what lead does. So if you have a kid who has ADHD and they were exposed to lead, was it their ADHD was always going to be like that, or did the lead make it worse? So it's impossible to know exactly the impact that lead will make on a pre-existing behavior problem. But the treatment is the same. So it's getting them plugged into a provider, getting them plugged into great behavioral health care, getting them the resources and the schooling that they need. So, we'll never know what the specific impact of lead was, but the treatment and the prevention stuff is essentially the same.
Dr. Edwards, would you also like to respond?
I concur with what Dr. Mona just said.
Thank you both for your answers. Our next question comes from Walter from Flint. Walter, the line is open.
Yes. What if when they get a little older, you start seeing these problems? Who's going to help with the cost of this? Is the city going to still be there for them, or is they going to be on their own?
Congressman Kildee?
Well, I think that's a very important question, and that's why when I talk about accountability, I want to make sure that we have a full conversation about what the true costs of this mistake might be. And so that's why Dr. Mona and Dr. Edwards, and I made reference earlier to the Centers for Disease Control, people who are professionals who understand the long-term effects can help us predict what kind of problems might occur. And as we're in this position where we're asking for those who are responsible for this decision to commit to be responsible enough to bear the cost for the implications of their decision, we need to make sure that we think that through. So this actually might be a question for Dr. Mona or Dr. Edwards to speculate on for our audience tonight, but it's certainly something that we're going to want to pursue further. So I don't know if either of the doctors would like to make comment on the potential long-term implications from a health standpoint.
There's a lot of research out there on the cost of childhood lead poisoning, and it's in the billions of dollars a year. So if you add the cost of the medical care, the lost income from lifetime earnings, the additional educational needs, the additional mental health needs, the cost of the criminal justice system. So it's estimated to range about $50 billion a year for our country. So that is staggering, and which is very ironic because this was all done in a cost-cutting move to switch water sources. So the costs are there, and we need to advocate and help our legislators get us the resources so that we don't have those funds. So we need to advocate for more spots in Head Start and Early Head Start. We need grocery stores in Flint so our people can have great nutrition. We need something like the Flint Promise where we guarantee all our kids have a free college education. So these are the kinds of things that we need to advocate for so we don't have these kind of lifelong consequences and costs.
Thank you, Dr. Mona.
In addition...
Go ahead, Dr. Edwards.
And in addition to the cost to people, which are really priceless, expensive, there's also damage to the infrastructure, the pipe system, and, easily costing tens, if not $100 million in terms of damage to that pipe system. So it was a costly mistake.
Thank you. As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question of either Congressman Kildee, Dr. Mona, or Dr. Edwards, please press 0 on your telephone keypad, and you'll be connected directly with one of our volunteer operators. Our next question comes from Eldrima, also in Flint. Eldrima, your line is open.
Hi. I wanted to know, what is now my grandchildren and I, we didn't drink the water, but I did cook with the water, and we bathe in the water. So what is the effect, and how much should I be concerned about that?
Dr. Mona, would you like to respond first? Or Dr. Edwards?
Sure, this is Mona.
Go ahead, Mom.
So cooking with the water, especially if you're using any hot tap water increases the leaching of the lead into your water. So when you cook it, the lead actually does concentrate in whatever you're cooking. But bathing, like we said earlier, really should have no impact. But once again, it's difficult to know what the impact was. So maybe, you ate a little bit of lead-tainted food. Go to your doctor. The lead testing may show something. It may not show something because the blood in your lead doesn't last too long. So we are really considering all of our kids as having some exposure. Some had a little or none, and some had a lot, but they all need the necessary interventions.
Dr. Edwards?
Yeah, just to reiterate that when you cook in water that's contaminated with lead, it can be concentrated in the food, and we've had many cases that I've explored where children were not drinking the water, but nonetheless were lead poisoned from food cooked in the water. So it can happen.
Thank you. Through tonight's town hall so far, we've had over 4,000 people join us. And so we appreciate your questions and appreciate your continuing to stay on the line. We have several questions continuing. The next question is from Christina in Flint. Christina, your line is open.
Hi, good evening. I was wondering, so if the Flint River water caused the lead to be in the pipes, is there some kind of game plan in changing those out? Because wouldn't any water source going through those pipes still be lead-based, even in 2016 when they changed to the other, I can't remember the name of the thing they were going to change to, but wouldn't the water still contain lead after that?
Dr. Edwards?
Yes, as long as we have lead plumbing, we are going to have some level of lead in water. But the issue is really, is the level higher than federal standards, which I believe it was in Flint throughout too much of the city. And when we switch back, the pipes will heal. They'll form a protective layer that keeps the lead on the pipe and mostly out of the water. So it won't be perfect. It'll be the same as other cities like Detroit and Washington, D.C., where there's some level of lead in the water. That will always be there as long as we have lead pipe and lead plumbing. But at least it will be at national norms.
Congressman Kildee, would you also like to respond?
Yes, it's a very good question because there are lots of different aspects of this. One has to do with, as Dr. Edwards pointed out, the return to a safer primary water source with corrosion control treatment applied to it. That will have the healing effect in the short term, in the near term. It does, though, sort of beg the question about the need for major improvement of our infrastructure. In this case, we're talking about water infrastructure. So the federal government could play an important role here, and I've been pushing for federal policy that would help finance really massive reconstruction of roads, bridges, rail systems, ports, and water infrastructure. And I'm particularly focusing on water infrastructure in older cities that have experienced population loss, because as we know in the city of Flint, the size of the water system is one that was designed a long time ago for roughly twice the number of people that we have. So it becomes a very expensive system and very difficult for water ratepayers to support when it comes to replacement of that infrastructure. So this is, I think, a legitimate place where the federal government should play a much bigger role in helping to replace those pipes.
Thank you, Christina, for your question. Our next question comes from Patty in Flint. Patty, your line is open.
Good evening, and thanks, first of all, to all of our hosts. We should have bronze statues of everyone, including Congressman Kildee. I have a question for Dr. Edwards. I had my water tested by the city of Flint, and I got the results back, and the lead count came back, according to them, very low at 6. This is my result was 6. Lead PPV AL15. Anyway, I just don't know if I trust them. So they told me they were going to retest the water after a couple weeks. And I believe what your team says, even that we should run the water, fill up the cup, but don't flush it. Let it sit for 6 hours. They had me flush it, which does not make sense. Flush the tap first. So I think, according to you, what I should be doing next time it's test, even though they give me instructions to flush the tap, don't. Just fill it up and then let it sit for 6 hours. I just want to know if that was correct. And the other thing, what about, I don't have a dishwasher. What about doing your dishes in hot water? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Patty, for your question.
Well,
Dr. Edwards?
One of the reasons we found so much lead in Flint's water is because we use the EPA standard protocol without additional steps. The state of Michigan, for reasons I don't understand, has an additional pre-cleaning step, as you said, which flushes the pipes out for 5 minutes the night before you collect your lead and water sample. And the effect of that is to make lead in water lower the next day when you test it, lower than it would be when you drink the water. And they also use bottles with very, very small openings so that you cannot collect water at a normal flow rate. And the effect of that is to also make lead in water look lower than it is when you normally use it. So I'm not casting aspersions here. I'm just telling you the facts. The facts are the sampling protocol that MDQ uses misses lead in water. Mr. Del Toro pointed that out earlier this year, and MDQ did not want to change the protocol so that they could find the lead when it was present. And I think that's a mistake. I've been asking to have these additional steps that are sometimes put into the sampling plan of EPA to be banned, and I've been asking for that now for 13 years because it can cause exactly what's happened in Flint. People like yourself being told that the lead in their water is low when it's not. So if you got a 6 parts per billion test with the MDQ pre-flush and small opening, I can frankly tell you right now your water is not safe to drink, and I would not be drinking it unfiltered. Of course, no one in the city should be drinking that water unfiltered now, even if it tested low in the MDEQ testing.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. Now we'll take another question, this time from Mary in Bay City. Mary, your line is open.
Yes, my daughter, she's on and listening to me right now. She's a student at U of M Flint. She is a high-risk patient and was diagnosed with cyclic vomiting syndrome many years ago. What is the long-term effects for any of that? And I do have a second question. Is the students in that were at Riverfront, where she resides, they are technically not a resident of Flint, but she goes to school there. She lives there during school. Why couldn't they get help? It took me over 2 weeks before U of M Flint took and said that they were going to get filters and bottled water from. They can't go to the United Way and get water because they're not residents, but they still take and go to school there and they live there. Why?
Dr. Mona, would you like to respond first?
Sure, Mary. I'll tackle the first question in regards to your daughter and her condition. People in college, we have so many people here going to school. We have so many great colleges and universities, and their brains are developing too. So, they may not be, babies and infants who are, having milestones every day, but they're also learning and growing and, their neurons are increasing. So they should also be taking the necessary precautions. And it's unknown what the long-term impact will be for her. But all you can do right now is to take the necessary precautions moving forward in terms of filters and water. And I cannot comment on why she did not get a filter, but I know that 211 is giving filters now to everybody, including people who don't live in the city. But I wish I could help you more there.
To the second part of the question, again from Mary, Congressman Kildee, would you like to respond?
Yes, first of all, Mary, thanks for calling in because this helps us do our job. I will take it upon my responsibility and my staff to directly deal with this question because as far as I'm concerned, anyone who depends on Flint drinking water should be able to access any of the support. This is a mistake that will have consequences for anybody affected by it, and you shouldn't be limited because of the fact that you might be a student from another part of the area. So we will take that on, and if you can make sure to get your information to my staff through the telephone line or by email, we will make sure to get back with you on that.
Thank you again, Mary, for your question. The next question comes from Noreen from Flint. Noreen, your line is open.
Good evening, and I want to thank you for including the residents of Flint in on your meeting and others, too, for joining us. I wish you would have let us know that you were making this switch in the first place. I was shocked by my water bill to find out. I'm concerned about the lead and all that, but I'm also concerned about the cost of the water. My bills are extreme, and I haven't heard anyone mention anything about that, and it has changed my way of living. I can't cook. I don't shower as often. I don't do laundry in the house anymore. I have to go to a laundromat because it's cheaper. I don't even know if it's safe or not, but it is cheaper. I buy paper plates, plastic forks, living like I've been camping here for 18 months. And I want to know if it's going to stop or slow down or it's just a mess. And I think it also was a criminal act on whoever switched from. Why did we switch from Detroit? We don't even have that answer yet. And why can't we just go back to Detroit?
Thank you, Noreen, for your question. Congressman Kildee, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. And the questions you raise are important ones. And, of course, the city has gone back to Detroit now at some cost. The cost of that transfer, of course, is being borne by the state of Michigan, the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, and the city of Flint. Now, I objected and continue to object to the city of Flint with its precious few dollars and its meager budget being asked to contribute anything for that cost because the $2 million that the city is spending to go back to the Detroit water source, while that clearly was the right thing to do, that should have been paid for by the state of Michigan because the $2 million now is not available for the city to use for other purposes, including paying down some of the cost of the water system that it operates, which would reduce the billing rates for customers. Now, $2 million wouldn't make that big of a dent, but that leads me to the other point. $22 million of relief from the debt that the city owes for previous borrowings from the revolving loan fund that it's due to pay back to the state of Michigan. If that money were not required to be paid back, which under federal law is a possibility, there's a difference of interpretation, but it's certainly a possibility. That would provide the city of Flint with a couple of choices. One, to provide rate relief to individuals that are contributing through their water rates to pay off that debt to the state of Michigan. Second, to use that money perhaps to improve the water system in other ways, or third, some combination of the two. So the decision that the state of Michigan and the Department of Environmental Protection, EPA, will have to make at the federal government regarding that $22 million loan is a very big question when it comes not only to the fairness of the situation, but to who's actually going to end up having to pay. And I think if Flint water ratepayers can get any relief at all, they certainly have done everything to deserve that.
Thank you, Congressman Kildee. I'm now going to take a moment. We asked you earlier in the telephone town hall a poll question. Do you support Congressman Dan Kildee's request for a federal investigation into the water problem in Flint? We asked you to press 1 if you agree, press 2 if you disagree, or press 3 if you were unfamiliar and would like more information. 82% of the people on the call tonight agreed for Congressman Kildee's call for a federal investigation. 15% said they were unsure or needed more information, and only 3% disagreed. Thank you again for your responses. We'll now take our next question from Janice from Flint. Janice, your line is open.
Hi, my question is for Congressman Kildee. I have been a resident of Flint for 7 years, and through this whole issue with the water and that, I have been very disappointed to see that no one, including the EPA, the MDEQ, the state of Michigan, the city of Flint, no one wants to take responsibility. Each one of them is pointing finger at the other. Wonder at some point that we are responsible for what happened to the residents of Flint, because this definitely was not our fault or our problem caused by us.
Thank you, Janice, for your question. Congressman Kildee, would you like to respond?
Well, I agree 100%. I've really, I've been, as many of you on the call know, I've been involved in local government for a long time, worked in the private sector for a long time, been in Congress now for 3 years, and I have probably never seen this degree of evasion of responsibility, in my career. I see people on television now, people who served in the emergency manager role, and everybody's pointing fingers at someone else. It's so interesting to me that the state of Michigan, with great publicity, took over the city of Flint and celebrated the successes that they think they created, proudly demonstrated that they were able to make decisions that made the city of Flint solvent, held news conferences to celebrate their victory. And then when it comes time to take responsibility for a mistake, everybody's got their fingers pointing at somebody else. The state of Michigan had control of the city of Flint. It did so by its own choice. The state of Michigan was in charge when they made the decision in order to save money in the short term to go to the Flint River water source, and nobody can evade that. That is a fact. Now, they want to say that local community folks supported it. That may be the case. But the fact of the matter is people who had the power to make the decision are the people who made the decision and the people who should be held accountable for the decision. And I'm as frustrated as anyone, because for me, this issue of accountability has nothing to do with who is supposed to apologize to us, but who is supposed to take responsibility by correcting with investment the failures that they contributed to. And you're right to be angry and frustrated by that, and I'm not going to stop until those who are held accountable are accountable.
Thank you, Congressman Kildee, and for that question. Now I'd like to turn it back over to Congressman Kildee for a brief moment of closing remarks. Congressman?
First of all, let me say what I said at the outset. There's a whole group of individuals, neighborhood organizations, individuals who stepped up in this, who are the champions of this story. What you have done, even though there has been damage done, and it's certainly nothing to celebrate, but as Dr. Edwards said earlier, the fact that this came to light prevented further dangerous lead from going into the water system and into the bodies of the people of the city of Flint. And so you did stop something that could have been far, far worse. And for that, all those citizens, all those voices that are sometimes not listened to, who would not quiet themselves, deserve a great big pat on the back from their fellow citizens. And then the work that Dr. Edwards has been doing and the critical role that Dr. Mona played in making sure to bring the truth to light, I think can't be forgotten. You make me proud to be a part of this effort, and I just want to thank you all for allowing me to take this moment to come into your homes and have this conversation. I look forward to doing it again very soon.
Thank you, Congressman Kildee. Unfortunately, tonight we had over 4,000 people on the call, and we were unable to get to every question. But if you have additional questions, please do stay on the line, and you will be able to leave a voicemail at the end of our event for Congressman Kildee or our experts. Thank you again for joining our call tonight, and I hope you have a great night. Good night.